Jackson, Tennessee is about 70 miles from Memphis, but it was east. That's where he was from. And Phil Hickerson, when you saw him walk in the dressing room, you say, "Who's that big fat guy?" Because he had a big belly and, But when he got in the ring, he weighed like 270, maybe more. But this guy worked like he was 210. He could take slams and he could take bumps and he could take backdrops and you could throw him over the top rope. And he moved like a lightweight. I mean, he was, if you're looking at it, and like the guy said, you knew how good Dennis Condrey was. And if you didn't know anything about Phil Hickerson, you say, why would he put Condrey with that guy? Till you saw him get in the ring and do the stuff. Brother, he was good. He was probably one of the best big men that I've ever seen.
All right, we're live for 304 Studios in Jonesboro, Arkansas. This is a STSpod.club production. I'm live in the studio with my old buddy, college, I always call him roommate, but my college friend, we're talking about, I've been knowing you since 1987.
Yeah, 88.
Probably
88,
87.
Yeah.
So we got, what anniversary we got coming up? We got like the 30th, is it 30th or 40th here in
man, do I have to take you to an expensive restaurant?
27. Yeah, you do. An expensive hotel also. So
oh my God. Hell? I got to start saving.
We can wrap all that up in one, some of those
that's true.
You go to the most expensive when you go to most expensive hotels, you don't get to continental breakfast. You have to spend like $30 on breakfast. You're like, what the hell happened? The cheap hotels have breakfast. So
I've read about those places. I've never.
Oh yeah. Well, we're not here to talk about hotel breakfasts, even though we started off. We're here to talk about. I'm just going to title this episode "Remembering Phil Hickerson." Yeah. You reached out to me, and I just want to be upfront with my listeners. I didn't do a lot with. I was backstage maybe once with him. I didn't work shows with him. I didn't know him. This is from me being just a huge fan. And I thought when you reached out to me, I thought, man, we're doing all episodes of Memphis in May. There'll be a great episode to do to finish up the month.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know he had passed away when you sent me the message. You said, hey, you want to do a Phil Hickerson? As soon as I got online the next morning or the next few hours, I was able to see all the stuff about Phil. And let me say, I was a huge fan, always was from the start. I loved him with Dennis Condrey. And one of the reasons I was such a huge fan of Phil's is he looked like me.
Yeah.
I looked like him. As a kid, I was this fat, chubby guy no matter what. I wasn't athletic like Phil was. Yeah. But, in Dutch, we played that opening segment. Dutch said everything that really needs to be said about him when it comes to his ability and everything. Yeah. But here was a guy, when I got older, is a bald-headed fat guy who was so good in the ring, so light in the ring, and so freaking believable. That's the part that even as P.Y. Chu-Hi, he was, well, maybe not, but he was pretty believable. You reached out to him. I'm going to let you, I've got some videos I want to share with everybody that I think, especially we're going to watch the most famous, I'm going to say famous because of who it ended up involved with and when we show it, but I'll let you start out. Yeah, I told you you're going to steer the ship a little bit talking about
Phil. No problem. Yeah, Phil was kind of the stereotypical fat Southern brawling wrestler in a lot of ways, talking about his appearance. And he looked a lot older than he was in some ways, but he didn't start until he was kind of in his late 20s. Phil was born in like 1946. I think he was in the military for some amount of time in the 1960s. And he was working in a factory as a forklift operator. in his hometown of Jackson, and some local guy who also wrestled on the side said, "Hey, do you have any interest in wrestling?" And Phil started training locally, and he started training with some of the guys out of Union City, where Coco Ware would come from later on. And he was able to start working part-time. So he spent almost a year working as a part-timer. And this was back when Goulas owned the Nashville and territory, and Jarrett was just an employee for Nate Goulas at that time. But he would show up on, with cards in both places. He'd show up like in Birmingham, Alabama, and then he'd show up in Jonesboro, Arkansas. It was just
right.
It was just like a weekend gig sort of thing. And then they asked him to start full time. And here's the thing that's kind of interesting to me is that when people think about the glory days of Memphis, a lot of people think about the early 1980s because we have all that video of, the Fabulous Ones and Lawler and Andy Kaufman and all the stuff that was going on.
Right.
But like 73, 74, 75, they were actually doing much, much bigger business in Memphis than they were doing in the early 1980s. They were doing huge business.
Oh, wow.
And Phil comes in 1974, and that was probably Memphis's biggest year. That's the year they made Lawler the main heel star, and that's what the year they brought in Jack Briscoe, and Lawler wrestled for the title for the first time. But they immediately put this guy who's basically a rookie, and they put him in a tag team with Al Green. And
wow. Yeah.
And Al Green, and with his quote brother Don Green, they weren't really brothers, but they'd been a top heel tag team for years, and they were known as that rough, brawling, Southern heat-seeking, team. And Phil comes in immediately. And he's not doing jobs, for 2 years. He's working against Tojo, Lawler, Jarrett, Tommy Gilbert, Rick Gibson. He's working against top guys immediately. And he did one, I think, podcast in his entire life, and that was with John McCall, Mayor McCall, however he refers to himself. And he talks about the first week he was in wrestling, he made $1,100 for 4 nights. And he said he which would probably be, if you looked at it in inflationary terms today, that would probably be like $6,000 or so in today's money. And he said he opened the envelope, and he had these $100 bills. He was paid in cash, and he said he and his wife were just crying because they'd never ever seen that sort of money. I'm sure as a forklift operator in 1972, he's probably making, $4 or $5 an hour or something like that, right? So anyway, he starts on top. He starts with a veteran, and Phil learns all the old school Southern heel psychology. You're pulling hair when the rest's not looking. You're using chains. You're double teaming. It's heavy blood territory. Using brass knucks, switching in and out of the ring behind the ref's backs, all those sorts of things.
Right.
So that team lasted for a couple of years, and then in 1975 he actually went babyface for a little bit because George Barnes and Bill Dundee were the lead heel tag team, and they were on top, and they were doing such great business. He turns babyface for a while. And then later in 1975, that's when he started with Dennis Condrey. So Al Green's run was kind of up as a wrestler. And Phil told the story that Dennis was actually about to be fired. He had missed some bookings, and they brought him into the office in Nashville, and they actually, told him they were going to let him go. And Jarrett said, "Dennis, why did you miss these bookings?" And Dennis said, I didn't have any money to make the town. I've been living on popcorn. I'm just completely broke right now.
Right.
And Jarrett said, "Okay, I'm not going to fire you. I've got an idea." And he teamed him with Phil Hickerson. And Hickerson said from the very beginning, Dennis and Phil could just look at each other, and they knew what each other was thinking. They just
that's really not the only person that said that about Dennis. It was really crazy. Everybody that tagged with him pretty much made he made it so easy for them, you know.
Right.
That's the way it always felt. I remember everybody that tagged with him saying, "Oh, he knew what we were going to do way ahead of." He's the one that taught. You know, when they was talking about Dennis when he passed away, I thought it was so interesting, you know, for Cornette and other people to say, "Hey, he taught us how to be a tag team. He taught us, you know, what to do and all that. You know, the coming in and out of heat, the hot tag, the everything." Dennis already knew all that. He was an older wrestler, and he just taught everybody how you're supposed to be a heel tag team.
Yeah, I mean they'd both just been in the business a couple of years at this point. I think this was probably Dennis's first big money spot. Really, I mean Phil had already been in a big money spot.
Right, right.
I think this was the first time Dennis really worked on top, and Phil said, they said, we're going to send you to the Nashville side of the territory and let you guys, you know, work out your you know, chemistry and how you're going to, you know, perform together. And he said within 2 weeks they were ready and they were back in Memphis. And again, they're feuding with Robert and Ron Fuller, Tojo, Jackie Fargo, you know, top guys right off the bat. And then 1976 comes along, and everybody's talking about the bicentennial. That's the big thing. You just heard it.
Right.
And so they became the Bicentennial Kings was their gimmick in 1976.
I love that. And you know, if you were not of age back then, and you're a young guy right now, a young person, man, that was such a big deal going on. I remember I had a Kiss poster.
Mm-hmm.
The bicentennial Kiss poster. I know you know exactly which one I'm talking about. It was on my wall.
It was on my wall. Yeah.
But it was such a big deal, and I thought that when I was reading up, I remember them saying that many times, but just the thought that I was reading Dennis's obit that Dave Meltzer did, and he did a fantastic job with that.
He did.
Always does a fantastic job. But he you know, them grabbing a hold of that, of all things, it was really smart for them to do it. I want to show you a match, and maybe you can put a timeline on it. It says, which you never know. I mean, you're not supposed to believe everything you read on the internet. You know, that's what Abraham Lincoln said. But here's, and it's weird because they dated a 78. And there's some kind of concession stand brawl. They don't get the cameras back there. I'm not going to show a lot of that, but I thought it was classic. So we'll just sit back and watch this. If you're not watching the video, you'll hear the sound. Guys, I can highly recommend you watch a video. We're only doing very few clips today, but they're all fun. They're really fun. So here we go.
Comes after Phil. Gibson in there. Whamming away on Dennis Condrey. Lawler getting a couple of hands full of Hickerson, while Robert Gibson is having a picnic with Dennis Condrey. Boy, there is a big right 2, 3, and Lawler covers Phil Hickerson, nails Al Costello. Phil Hickerson messed up by Lawler, but good. Now Hickerson taking it out on Gibson, while Lawler was popped twice by Al Costello, and there's Condrey over after Lawler. Robert Gibson swinging a wild right, nailing Hickerson. Phil Hickerson takes one from Robert Gibson. Oh, he likes that. But Lawler being hammered by Dennis Condrey, while Hickerson and Costello have a hold of Robert Gibson. Boy, the action just continues. The bell has rung several times, indicating the end of it. The official bout ended up about 4 minutes and 32 seconds. With Lawler and Gibson being the winner. But the action continues. Robert Gibson being slashed by Hickerson and Costello. Lawler climbing back into the ring with a chair. He zeroes in on Phil Hickerson, and the wrecking crew head for the showers. Here comes Lawler out of the ring after him. Robert Gibson following by. And the official winners, having won the second, they're tearing up at the locker room down there, and Hickerson and Condrey trying to disappear and get out of it. But they're still going at it. I hope our broadcast booth survives.
And now they built him as the wrecking crew, which I thought was the deal. Rick Gibson was probably one of these guys who, if you were not in this area, and I will say I'm one of them too, so underrated. He is just such a good Robert's older brother, right?
Was that Rick or Robert in that match, though?
I thought it was Rick. It might have been Robert. It might have been Robert.
Where
was that at? Do you know?
It looked like Tupelo to me.
Okay.
And they were called the Wrecking Crew in like late 1977 after they were called the Bison.
So that date might be right. Yeah, that date, 78, early 78 is what they're saying. But I don't something that happened and is so weird to me, and I get it, but you know, when I was a huge tape collector. I mean, I had a whole in my apartment when my roommates finally, I had a whole floor full of like 800 and something tapes, you know.
Yeah.
And you think all the time that you got all of the old clips.
Right.
And I had told the story before we got started for our Patreon about, you know, Jim Cornette getting some stuff transferred. And then, you know, I know what happens. A lot of these guys weren't trading tapes. We didn't have all that fun stuff in circulation, and then they find it and they start putting it up on Facebook. They start, and this is one of those clips that I didn't even know existed. I'm just like, what the hell? Who had this? It looks like I would think it looked like a just an arena show kind of thing, but Lance was doing it. But I thought it was funny because this was concession stand brawl, but they did not go to the concession stand with the cameras. I said, man, they must have learned their lesson from this clip.
I think Jerry had to pay, you know, quite a bit out of pocket to put the concession stands back together every time they did that. But yeah, speaking of clips that aren't out there, Cornette, years and years ago, I bought some tapes directly from Cornette, and we were mentioning it earlier, but there's a tape of Hickerson and Condrey in Alabama, and they have Tommy Rich handcuffed to a ring rope, and they're just pounding on Tommy Rich, and Rich is just selling like he's just trying to survive, and the heat is just off the charts. I mean, you feel like people are just about to riot when you watch that tape. And I think, you know, people who didn't grow up in that era just don't realize the intensity and passion of the Southern wrestling fans, because they, you know, it wasn't like, oh, I don't like that heel. It was like, I hate that son of a bitch, and I want him to die. You know?
Oh, it was. I remember when I first started going, that I guess it was probably about the third or fourth year of going to Blythe, Arkansas, watching the shows live. I just kind of realized that these people are effing crazy that come to wrestling, and I might be, you know, I might enjoy the show and I might get into it. Yeah. But nowhere, at no time did I ever think to myself, I want to beat this guy up after the matches. I want to bring it to the matches. Nothing like, but people were just nutty. There was a guy that worked at a local service station there in Still, Missouri, and he went to every Believable show. And I say that because it's typical what you said. People living there wouldn't understand it. He was not a huge wrestling fan. He went to watch the fans.
Yeah.
He said, I watch wrestling every once in a while on TV. You know, it's on. Everybody watches wrestling. He goes, you know, I go watch the fans. They're nutty down there. And, you know, I drank my beer. And I'm like, I didn't get it until I sat there. I watched him watching them. And that's what he was doing. He was just watching the people.
Yeah. So we'll move up to 1977, talking about riots. So during the summer of that year, Hickerson and Condrey and there were some other Memphis guys that went up to Nova Scotia, which was a territory like up in the Maritimes. It didn't run the full year; it just kind of ran, 5-6 months out of the year. And Tommy Gilbert was up there. Young Terry Gordy was up there. But Jim Cornette tells the story that Hickerson and Condrey got so much heat that there was an actual riot. And the way that they got out of it was David Schultz took a hockey stick and he's walking through the aisle and he's swinging it like it's a helicopter rotor to get out of the way. And he gets to the ring and he walks them back out. And I think shortly after that match, they said, we got too much heat up here. We're going back to Tennessee. So they didn't stay up there terribly long that year. They didn't feel like it was in their best interest. Interesting thing was, Condrey became the big national star in the 80s. And so a lot of times when people think about the Hickerson and Condrey team, they think about Condrey because we know so much more about him.
Right, right.
But Hickerson was really the star of the team, and that he would feud with Jackie Fargo in singles matches. And after they came back from Canada, for a short time, they went for Nick Goulas, and this was after the split from Jarrett.
Oh, wow.
So they're working for Nick, and the big angle is Phil Hickerson has a TV match, and he's using brass knuckles on Fargo, and there's no clips of this. There's just almost no clips of Goulas TV during this era.
Right.
But they say the fans were just almost crying that Jackie was bleeding so much and was selling so hard. And they were just like, stop this. It was just such a brutal TV angle. So he feuded there for a couple of months. And then in 1978, they end up going to Knoxville. So that's back, there's three distinct territories in Memphis at this time. You got Jarrett, you got Goulas, and you got Robert Fuller.
Right, right.
You got the state split up. And again, they're working on top in Knoxville. They're working against Kevin Sullivan and Ken Lucas, Jimmy Golden and Ricky Gibson, and they stayed there for most of the year. But so that's kind of the end of 78, and that's kind of the end of Phil's first run because he leaves the business shortly after that for several years, which is really unusual for a wrestler to do that and then come back like he did. And I listened to Gene Jackson's podcast with Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert. And they were
I ain't got a chance to listen to that yet, but yeah.
Yeah. And Doug said that he that there's the rumor that Phil was injured and that's why he left the business. And Doug said, no, I don't really think it was that. I think it was more of a family thing. Being on the road so much was breaking up his family, and he wanted to stay with his wife. So for about, the better part of 6 years, Phil's out of the business. They talked about him driving a truck during that time or something of that nature. And then he came back in June of 1984, and this is the Hickerson that most people get to see. And unfortunately, he's a little heavier. He looks older than he is because of the balding.
Hey.
Well, my dad would say, that guy's 60 years old and they're trotting him out there to wrestle. and he was like 40-ish,
Yeah.
But, he still had the big gut. I mean, the WWF and NWA was not going to call Phil Hickerson at the time.
Sure, no.
No matter how good he was. But, he's still in a good spot. He teams with.
Is this where we end up with Sting and Ultimate Warrior, or is this where
yes.
he comes back? Does he do the Gets No Respect? Because I want to show those two clips, but
yeah. Well, first he's tagging with Frank Morrell. Frank Morrell's known as the Spoiler at that time.
Right.
They feud against Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert, and there's a really bloody match out there available.
I want to tell people that feud was so underrated. It was so underrated. And Phil had done an angle with Doug when Doug was just a kid.
Yeah.
Which is up on YouTube. You can watch it. Is it up on YouTube? Is that correct? I guess so. I'm gonna say it anyway. it's up on YouTube, and Doug was just a total kid doing the photography gimmick where he beats the photographer up kind of thing. And then Frank Morrell and Phil were just against the new Fabs was something, PYTs is one of my favorite feuds. But when I went back, I was looking at that. I was like, damn, those matches were crazy too. So they just bloody brawls.
And if you look at like Phil's work even then, it's like everything he did had maximum impact. Nothing was pretty. It was, he wasn't doing hip tosses or drop kicks. I mean, he's just pounding people. Basically. No,
he was a brawler. He was. If you you want to see what a brawler is and what a brawler is all about, it's just one of those things. I remember some of the people talking about Bruiser Brody, and me thinking, I got a whole tape of Bruiser Brody, and I got done watching it, and I was just like, at first I started watching, I was like, what's the big deal? Yeah. He's not doing anything. Yeah. But then I started looking how flawless everything looked and how everything looked real, and he was just beating that, in my mind, beating the hell out of everybody. But that's kind of the way Phil, and don't get on me, folks. I'm comparing Phil Hickerson to Bruiser Brody. I know Brody's a god, but the thing is that it looked so real. I want to play this, Get No Respect. This is, you don't have to watch this to appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to be back in the ring in just a moment. We'll be looking at Coco Ware, and you're not Tom Branch.
I'm back.
No.
I'm having a little problem, Lance. Let me just say, I made 2 phone calls. I got a hold of one person. I didn't get a hold of the other. I tried Jimmy Valiant first, and I wasn't able. There was nobody at his home. I called in. Jimmy is currently wrestling over in the Mid-Atlantic area in Charlotte, North Carolina. I called the booking office there and was able to talk to Jim Crockett. The problem being, a lot of people wonder, there's not only wrestling in Memphis on Monday nights, but there's wrestling, in different cities all around the country. Monday night happens to be apparently just a good night for wrestling. A lot of the different areas have their major cities, the wrestling on Monday nights, and Jimmy is booked in North Carolina, already booked in a title match over there, and so it's not going to be able to get him out. Dundee, for some reason or other.
Don't come out here, please, causing any trouble, Phil.
No, wait a minute. Anyway, let me tell you. Anyway,
and
Bill Dundee. I talked with Bill Dundee, and I heard Hickerson what he said out here earlier, and apparently there is some sort of problem. Bill won a match over Bowtie, and he was supposed to get a shot at my Southern title, and he said he was still waiting on that shot, and I said, I don't even have the belt anymore, and he said, well, I'll wait and come in when you do have the title, and he wants to wrestle me for the title for some reason. Anyway, Bill Dundee is not coming. But, Lance, I have a lot of telephone numbers here. There are a lot of guys around the country that don't like the Freebirds. I was just thinking the Von Erichs possibly, somebody like that. So, anyway, I'm going to make some more phone calls, and I will get somebody.
Okay,
Put
Jerry.
that book up, brother. You don't need no quarter to call anybody in that book. You can talk to me. I'll be your partner, man. Yeah. Hey, together, Lawler, me and you can whoop anybody in the world. In the world, I'm telling him, Lance Russell, that Lawler and Phil Hickerson can beat anybody in the world.
Phil, we know you're tough, but I don't think anybody trusts you.
Man, the free birds, the sheep herders, man, the road warriors, you name it. And, boy, we'd be in lights. Yeah. I'm telling you, man, we'd be in lights, Lawler.
Names and lights, right? Let me just say this, Phil. You're as easy to see through as a pane of glass. The problem with you is you want recognition. You want your name in lights, right?
Sure.
You're the international champion. I'll admit.
No respect out of it,
no respect. I'll admit that you are a tough wrestler.
That's right.
You beat a lot of good men. Terry Taylor, Harley Race, you got the title. I'll admit all that. But you want the recognition that you think you deserve. And I think that what you got in your mind, Phil, is the way that you're going to get all the recognition, as you said, worldwide, the way that everybody would be talking about Phil Hickerson would be, he's the man that turned on Lawler when Lawler let him go.
No, man, I won't turn on him.
No. And when I'm going against some guys, when I'm wrestling against the Freebirds, you've already seen what they're capable of. I got to have somebody, Phil, that I can trust. So thanks, but no thanks.
Trust is the word, and that is exactly. You can't blame. Hey, all I'm telling you, you want to know why.
I don't get no.
Yeah.
The boy's crazy. I'm telling you, we can beat anybody in the world.
Yeah, particularly him. If 3 of you jumped on him all at one time. Okay, we're going to talk to...
All right, let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about that clip real quick.
Jackson, Tennessee, get ready to kick your summer off with a laugh as Highland Avenue Comedy brings the funny to Hub City Brewing Company June 6th at 8 p.m. Get ready for a night of nonstop laughs with some of the best comedians around. Whether you're out with friends or planning the perfect date night, you don't want to miss the show. Tickets are only $10, and you can get yours now at HubCityEvents.com and come enjoy some great drinks, great vibes, and even better comedy. Highland Avenue Comedy at Hub City Brewing Company June 6th at 8 p.m. Be there!
Are you ready? Every Friday night, the heat rises in Arkansas. The lights go down, the crowd gets loud, and MCW takes over. This is live, hard-hitting, in-your-face action at the MCW Arena, West Kaiser in Osceola, Arkansas. Doors open at 6:30, bell time at 8 p.m. sharp. Rivals explode, bodies hit the mat, and the stars of MCW leave it all in the ring. This ain't just wrestling. This is MCW. Tickets on sale right now. Don't wait. Be part of the action. Follow MCW on Facebook for the latest updates. And be there every Friday night. Or hear about it later. Card subject to change.
Don't miss Memphis Wrestling Live. Next Sunday, May 31st, Big Vito is coming to Memphis Wrestling to close the deal. Saturday, June 6th, it's Wrestling Night with the Memphis Hound Dogs at the Memphis Sports and Events Center. Sunday, June 14th, don't miss Memphis Wrestling Legends PG-13 are coming to Memphis Wrestling. Friday, June 19th, Memphis Wrestling is coming to Jackson, Tennessee. Join us live at the Picture Perfect Event Center. Saturday, June 20th, catch Memphis Wrestling live at Brewfest 2026 at Shelby Farms. Thursday, June 25th, Memphis Wrestling tag teams with Arkansas Travelers for Lucha Libre Night featuring Grand Metalik. All tickets are on sale now. Get yours right now at memphiswrestling.tv.
All right, back from commercial. I love that clip because it does lead to a tag team match, and they do go against the Freebirds. And no one, if someone said Jerry Lawler and Phil Hickerson, something I had to be reminded of, wrestled the Freebirds, I would never, and I've got a clip, real small clip later on, of somebody that Phil tagged with that is one of those just a hidden gem that you just never and win against. It's really a neat clip. But this led to a tag team match. What I want to say is it also goes back to Phil being believable.
Right. Well, it was kind of what, in the military they called a battlefield promotion, because Austin Idol was tagging up with Lawler. They'd started a program with the Freebirds. Austin's not happy with the paycheck, of course. So
always,
right. So he just walks out. So they've got to plug somebody in there. And Phil was the quote international champion at that time. That belt that they had started using in the early '80s, and he'd beaten Harley Race, he'd beaten Terry Taylor, Coco Ware. So I mean they were using Phil in a good position as a singles wrestler at this time. And and you're going to be in a main event feud with the Freebirds. What's it going to be? It's going to be a brawl, right?
Hell yeah.
And so Phil can do that, and I'm sure that, he'd probably come across Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes at some point during their career. Of course, they were up in Nova Scotia together, where I mentioned earlier with the 15, 16-year-old Terry Gordy working on the first territories. So I'm sure those were fun matches, but they did like 3 segments, I think, during that show, where finally Lawler gives in and starts, putting Phil over. Phil had worked at this bar in Jackson some when he wasn't wrestling. And he's talking about how, Phil was the guy that dealt with anybody who got out of line at the bar, and they did do that run there for a bit. So that was a nice opportunity for Phil to get some get some main events there.
I love it that Lawler kind of brings, like you said, the real deal going on. I can't find a partner. We're doing 87 CWA 87. Gene and I are, and we haven't got to it yet. But there was something that I thought was interesting is that when they had brought in, well, we're right there where they brought in Bigelow for the first couple of shows. The reason they brought Bigelow in is Lawler couldn't find anyone else to work. Everybody else that was famous in Memphis, the Dutch Mantel, Bill Dundee, Handsome Jimmy, they were all working other territories. So he couldn't bring them in. And that's kind of what he tells in that story right there. Hey, I wish I could bring these guys in, kind of thing. I love it that they put him over Harley Race. And then by Lawler saying that, he really is leading up to, he's putting over Hickerson to put him in the main event position without a match. With just saying, okay, look, you beat Harley Race. By him beating Harley Race, then that puts him in that position where, he would be a good tag team partner. And being from Jackson, Tennessee, the thing, Lawler was always from Memphis. They always made a point to say, Lawler goes off on Phil when Phil comes in as PY Chu-Hi in 91 that we're covering. He says, that's not Michael St. John. Why are you saying that's PY Chu-Hi? We all know that's big fat Phil Hickerson from Jackson, Tennessee. So they've always put that Jackson, Tennessee thing over. So he's a Tennessean. He's Lawler, I love all that. The little things is what I like about wrestling. You can do everything you want to do, but if you just put the little tidbits in there,
Lawler was great, and this is something I've heard Jim Cornette also say. Here's what I learned from Jerry Jarrett: if you say A and A is true, and you say B and B is true, then once you get to C and D and E, you can start working. But the people know A and B is true, and they're going to, like Phil Hickerson is from Jackson. He works at this bar. He's a tough guy. Right. He established all these things are true. And then you can start working, and people are like, well, you said all these things we know are true. So you're right. I mean, that's just great, interview psychology. He left for a couple of years again. It's really interesting career because he would leave and come back, but he never worked other territories outside of Tennessee for long periods of time at all. He really stayed
around home. Yeah.
Almost his entire career. So he comes back in 1988. Then they have this thing called the CWA heavyweight title. He wrestles Max Payne for that belt.
Right.
He calls him Maxi Pad. And but I think this would have been after the time that we were talking about one point, his famous line about Sting and
I'm gonna play that. Yeah.
So those guys come in. I think it was 1985 or so that those guys came in. They were brand new to the wrestling business. The future Ultimate Warrior and Sting, and
let's just play that then. It's a 5-minute segment, but it's worth watching, folks. And if you're not watching the video, you're just listening to most of it's listening to what Lance says. And this is really the clip that made Phil Hickerson famous, because look at the two guys he's on the screen with, the Ultimate Warrior and Sting. And by the way, personal trivia. I was in Believable on Friday night before they came to Memphis TV.
Okay.
And got all kinds of pictures they posed for me the whole 9 yards while they're in the ring, but they were there the Friday before the Saturday. So here we go. Yeah, fun stuff.
The Freedom Fighters, Steve Borden and Jim Hellwig have asked for a little time out here. We're delighted to have the guys back here. We welcomed to the territory a couple of weeks ago, and so here you are, back after a couple of weeks in this area.
Yeah, it's been an all right couple of weeks, except for there's nobody out there that's good enough to beat us, and we're tired of these small matches. We want some big matches, somebody like who do we want to get? Phil Hickerson, Jerry Lawler. The most important thing is we come from California. We come out here, we're undefeated. We come out here, we've been out here 3 weeks, and we're still undefeated, and we haven't had any
been at the top of the card yet with some of the top guys. With Phil Hickerson. And,
well, it takes a little time, Jim. I mean, this doesn't happen overnight.
Well, we understand we're a little green and new to the area and stuff like that, but when you take into account what we look like, our physiques, and the rock-hard muscle that we're carrying, that should add up to some of the disadvantages compared to, the fat people, the king of all the fast food restaurants, Jerry Lawler, and Phil Hickerson. Spends his days, he never goes to the gym, never seen the inside of a gym.
Yeah, but he's held a lot of titles now. Let me make that difference right there, that Hickerson, and I have always agreed with him, but the son of a gun has been at it a long time, Jim, and you and Steve, I think, got to take that in consideration.
I don't think so. Title shot.
I think they're probably in a hurry, Phil, and
I got to tell you, man, I ain't got nothing against you, and since y'all been here, I've been trying to hit y'all, I've been talking to everybody. You ain't got no right to come out here and say, hey, I hadn't seen the inside of a gym, and I'm fat, and then I said, you don't have a right to say that. Let me tell you something. You know the reason why you hadn't wrestled against Lawler and any, like Dundee, Mantell, myself, or Coco, the reason you two have not wrestled in them matches because you're green, and you don't know how to wrestle. The only thing that you know how to do, brother, is to pull them britches down and put them steroids in that booty. That's the only thing that you two idiots know, and you know it. Where you're coming from. This 22-inch arm, I'll put your head in there and smash it like a rotten tomato. Don't scare me one damn bit, brother, because one thing about it, I can wrestle, and I can fight, and that's something that you can't do. You cannot do either one, and that's the reason why you're going to reach wrestling in the first and second matches the rest of your damn life.
All right, Phil, I think they heard it out there. I think they got the point.
You don't have no right to come out here and say anything about anybody, brother. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of rights. All the help and stuff that you can... That's right. Yeah, I'm telling you that right now, boy. Let's go. Let's go.
Hey, come on. Hey. Phil. Jim Hellwig and Phil Hickerson disappeared on me up in the ring. Jerry Calhoun saying, get out off the ring to Steve Borden. And Hickerson dressed in street clothes, and here we go, Dave.
Well, I tell you, Hickerson in here going against Jim Hellwig. Hellwig with a forearm, nails Hickerson. And another one, back on the ropes. Hickerson coming back with a right hand of his own.
I think Jim Hellwig made the same mistake a lot of people do when they look at Hickerson. They think, he's not in shape or anything like that. Let me tell you, he's messing with one of the toughest guys you'll find around a wrestling ring anywhere.
Toughest one's ever been around here, and Phil Hickerson, and I think Hickerson proving that at the moment anyway. He picks Hellwig up and slams him.
Showed he could handle that 285, did he?
Yeah. Hickerson says, working out in the gym with weights and building the muscles is fine, but... look out, Steve Borden in there. That's going to end the match here. Because it's now 2 against 1. Hellwig and Borden.
All right. Absolutely. Look, I'll give us the background since that's where we're at in CWA. So if you're watching the video, you see me and Steve now are background of CWA. So sitting at the desk. This is one of my favorite things. Here's we just talked about interview and all that thing. Think about what Phil said. Right. He listed all of the stars in that. He put all them over. This is the guys that is over. These are the top guys, and you're not wrestling them for a reason. Right. He was shooting,
yes,
in the sense. But what I thought was Hellwig said before he even came out, which I think they probably went over the interview with these two guys. Hellwig probably shouldn't have said what he said about we're green. But he came out and said, you guys are green. These are the stars. In other words, these guys don't want to work, you muscle heads, because you can't work. You're only reason you look the way you do is steroids. Okay, it's the fucking truth. You know, we know that.
That's probably the most famous line of Hickerson's career. All you know how to do is pull down your britches and put the steroids in your booty.
I would have loved to talk to Phil about those first few forearms across the chest.
Yeah.
About whether they look stiff as hell that he had give Phil. The first one looked like he said, "What the hell happened?"
Yeah.
But you know, I never heard anything about Phil being stiff or anything.
No.
But his punches and everything looks so good. He looks like he's just beating the hell out of Hellwig. And you know, Sting comes in, they do the whole thing with that. But that, you know, that was good stuff. And I was, you know, I was a fan of the Freedom Fighters. Like I said, I was down there because they look like big superheroes is what they look like. But when Phil came out and said all that, you know, I just thought it was hilarious. And it was one of those aha moments. You're not supposed to say that, Phil. You're not supposed to say that about steroids.
I mean, the contrast is just so striking. Like I say, we've got the typical Southern brawler, heavy, out of shape looking guy. And then you got these guys who, you know, we're in the steroid era now. We're in the Road Warriors era now. And so, you know, it's just such a remarkable visual contrast. And the reality is Phil probably could have just beat the shit out of both guys without even trying hard.
That's what I was going to say. You know, if it would have been a shoot, yeah, he probably would have beat the shit out of both of them. I thought for some reason, no matter how early these interviews I look at, Hellwig, I'm wanting him to turn into the Ultimate Warrior and start that ranting and carrying on. And then seeing Sting do that interview, I didn't think Sting was that bad. I mean, that was one of maybe the third or fourth interview he ever did. I was like, man, he was going to be a star. But when you looked at those two guys, you also thought that. You thought that, and we were right. I mean, you were right because both of them was huge stars. But when you saw those two guys standing there together, you was like, man, these guys are going to be stars. And this out of shape guy in his looked like he was wearing cowboy boots, and in his slacks and shirt gets in, and he beats the hell out of this guy. And you're thinking, yes, that you know, it don't matter about muscles when. And I love the interview where he was, getting no respect. We can beat the Road Warriors. And I'm like, don't get too excited. No, I mean, I don't think Lawler wants to work the Road Warriors again. So.
One of the things Tommy Rich said is if you were in a bar fight, you'd want Phil on your side.
Right.
Because he was a legit tough guy. Has that run in 1985. We talked about, working with Harley Race and all those different people. Phil spoke very highly of Harley Race, like a lot of the wrestlers do. Again, he takes a couple of years off. He comes back in 1998. He wrestles Max Payne, who he calls Maxi Pad, in another kind of memorable interview. He gets the CW8 heavyweight title. He's defending against Billy Travis, Jeff Jarrett. So he's the veteran working with the young guys at this point. He's the guy teaching, the ring psychology to the people who are just been in the business, been in a year or so, And then in late 1988, he goes and he tours all Japan with Crusher Blackwell. And legend has it that he and Tommy Rich were drinking heavily one night, and Tommy decided he needed to work.
No.
Yeah. We needed to help Phil on a new gimmick. So he shaves Phil's head, and Phil comes back as P.Y. Chu-Hi. Now, the name is interesting for a couple of reasons. Tojo Yamamoto had wrestled as P.Y. Chung in the 1960s.
Right.
When he went to North Carolina. There's also a beer in Japan called Chu-Hi, but it's spelled differently. It's Chuhai. There's an A in it. So kind of probably a combination of Tojo's last name and that beer. He becomes P.Y. Chu-Hi. But of course, the HI at the end is Hickerson,
Yeah. Look, I didn't know that till just right now. Look,
yeah.
It took me years to get the humorous gimmick. I didn't know why is this guy laughing? Why is he laughing? Yeah, there we go.
So then, and probably his last, big run, he's using the PY Chu-Hi gimmick, and Jarrett has bought Dallas, and he goes into Dallas managed by Tojo. And they kind of play it straight, I mean, of course, everybody in Memphis knew him as Phil Hickerson, but in Dallas,
big fat Phil Hickerson.
Yeah, they didn't know
Jackson, Tennessee, as well as
yeah, they didn't know big fat Phil so much in Dallas, so they kind of play it straight that this guy's PY Chu-Hi, and he's in a main event angle. Eric Embry is the booker and the lead babyface, wouldn't you know it? And they do this big match. That's available on YouTube, and it's for the ownership of the USWA. They had to change the name of the promotion because the Von Erichs were suing them over the World Class Championship Wrestling name. And I think it may have been a cage match. I'm not 100% sure. I know Tojo was put in like one of those little ringside cages so he couldn't interfere, that gimmick. But, I mean, Phil was, wrestling Chris Adams. He was wrestling all the top guys down there. And he's the top guy, heel, representing this heel faction that's trying to take ownership of the USWA. Embry wins, and really, that's probably like the last big pop you're going to see out of that.
Yeah, Gene talks about that. We talked about that when Phil came back on 91. We're doing the USWA. He came back as PY Chu-Hi again, like I said, with Lawler going off on him. He talks about that. That was a big deal too. I always talk about the Road War. The Blade Runners thing, but he said, that he is there for one of the big moments in Texas wrestling. You always think, the Freebirds turn on the Von Erichs and all that stuff, but when it comes to USWA and all that, it was him. So
right. So. That's kind of the cherry on top of a really good career. He did wrestle some more after that, but he was not in a featured position so much. He was the old salty veteran. Never put in a bad spot. Never put in that old guy that becomes the job guy spot. But never put in a top position again. And I thought Doug Gilbert had a good line. He said Phil made everybody look good.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I thought that.
Oh man, you can't if you are in the wrestling business and someone says that about you can't get a better compliment, because it's not always how good you look. And that's kind of my complaint about some of the everybody wants to get their shit in.
Right.
And I was always on my guys about it. You don't have to. You don't.
Right.
We're here to do. We're here to do a match, and we can get some of our shit in, but we don't have to get all our shit in. And that's kind of what Phil was. He made everybody, and he was. I'll say this. I've said it 3 or 4 times, but he was that fat ball-headed guy from Jackson, Tennessee, was so realistic to me. At no time did I ever think he was a joke. Even as PY Chu-Hi, he's going to beat the crap out of you. I mean, I don't want to be around this guy.
Yeah. I think if you really want to learn old school wrestling psychology, you watch some Phil Hickerson matches, because he always knew what to do and when to do it.
And even in brawling,
right.
people say a lot of times, well, that was a hardcore match and blah blah blah, and I'll go, it was a hardcore match that mainly me and Steve could do. Not that we would look good doing it, but we could do it because there was no psychology to it. A hardcore match has, I remember talking about Seth Rollins as somebody, and I said, watch how it does. It starts just like any other match. You got shine at the beginning. Mm-hmm. You got the heel getting heat. You got the hope spots in the hardcore match. You still have to put the fans in the middle of it. Right. And he was able to do that. You was believing everything he was doing. That old match that we watched earlier, you said you think it's for Tupelo. Those punches and stuff, and then he's just pouring with blood. I know he loved to bleed. Tell me something when his career ended. And, I've said this to you before, and everybody on the podcast knows I can think of things that happened, no chronicle order. I have no idea. Kind of like my real events in my life, not only wrestling. That the only thing keeps me honest about real events of life is I know what year I graduated and what year I went to college.
There you
I
go.
don't know when my kids were born. I don't know when I got married. I don't know any of that stuff. But when did he become the DJ? At what point did he do the DJ work?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what year he started doing that. Doug talked about that he sold cars for a while.
Oh, wow.
And he said he was very successful at doing that. And that's the thing you see a lot of wrestlers transition into after they've been selling, their entire lives. Right?
Hey, car salesmen are workers just like everybody else. And that's why I hate them. I hate them so much is because, I had this saying with my wife, and I'll say it to her, and she gets it. She knows what's going on. I'll say, you can't work a worker. And she knows I'm saying that guy is telling you bullshit, and we're not going to listen to him because I know he's telling bullshit. So it's one of those things where I can see where he'd be fantastic at it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about the DJ. Was he doing music or was he doing sports?
I think it was like on country radio stations there in Jackson, Tennessee. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know, he did some like the morning guy, the morning team. I know he worked some like afternoon shifts as well. But I mean, this wasn't like a year or two. I mean, I think he did this 15, 17.
He did it for a long time.
A really long time. So he was kind of, he was a local celebrity in Jackson. I mean, anybody who had that notoriety of being in the wrestling business for that year. And of course, he had been talking on television for decades. So it wasn't, a hard transition for him at all, I'm sure, to get on the radio. I do a
radio thing, the radio thing was a big deal back then. So him being on a morning show or something like this, perfect example here in Jonesboro when Brandon Baxter left the wrestling business to become a DJ. It was shocking to him at how much money he was making and how popular he was. He was in the wrestling business for so long. But after he was on the radio for 2 years, he couldn't go anywhere here in Jonesboro without somebody coming up to him. And him thinking that should have been probably his when it come to his popularity as a wrestler. It wasn't. It was a popularity as a DJ. I'm gonna play a quick clip right here, and this is my hidden gem. I just love it. Phil is tagging with somebody very famous against two other people. One of them really famous also.
Beat them in the upcoming match. They want a title match. Okay, David, we're right down to the wire here, but we still got some time for another, what could be a good match.
Could be a good one. Tag team match coming up here. You see the names on the screen there. Brian Lee and Scott Steiner in the ring. Scott out of Detroit, Michigan. Brian, you met earlier. He's out of Orlando, Florida. Weighs in at 268. Gives you an idea of his size. Speaking of size, across the way, you got Cactus Jack at almost 250. He's out of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and carrying that CWA heavyweight belt in his hand, and who knows what else he might have hidden on his person. Out of Jackson, Tennessee, Phil Hickerson. Downtown Bruno's in their corner. Downtown Bruno Hickerson, I guess I should say.
Yeah, we got to be sure and get that in because he'll pester you for the rest of the weekend if you don't say that about him.
Jerry Cal.
Downtown Bruno Hickerson, by the way, just so you know that. But I could not believe it. I'm going through these matches and I told you I'm trying to find something. So if somebody can pull this off Facebook, I might have dreamed it. But in my mind, it's Dennis and Phil. Phil's bleeding horribly bad, and I want to think on the other side of the ring is Lawler, and they're brawling in the crowd by the announcer's table. I might have imagined that. But I'm
sure that happened. Yeah.
I'm assuming that happened, but I looked all over Facebook before we started recording this. Got anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I was going to make the point earlier about, those guys that had been in television and wrestling and then they go to radio and it's a natural fit. And I do a radio show and I get in that studio and the microphone looks like a pipe bomb and I'll freeze for 30 seconds while I'm on the air. So it's not the most natural thing for everybody. But, a really interesting, like as a kind of a singular career, a guy that worked on top or, if he wasn't on top, he was always in a good position. stayed in the same area for years and years, and was kind of, the last of those old Southern wrestlers, and talked about bridging into that steroid era where wrestling became completely different. And Phil would have never worked in a lot of territories, but he was perfect for Memphis wrestling.
You could say that about Spot Moondog too. Larry was perfect after he turned into Spot Moondog. It was that brawling. He stayed in the area. He started wrestling a wrestling show in Osceola, Arkansas, so he could stay home with him and his wife and kids. And it's just one of those things where Phil the in and out just got me the sense that, and it might have been just tired of the BS. There's so much BS you have to deal with in the wrestling business, even at the smallest local level ever. Let me tell you, I got the stories. But yeah, I mean,
Tommy did tell a funny story about when they were feuding with Phil.
Who did?
Tommy Ridge.
Oh, okay, all
right. When they were feuding with Phil Hickerson and Frank Morrell, and Tommy had walked into Phil's locker room in the Mid-South Coliseum, and he'd had his check on him on an envelope, and they're just BSing and cracking up and telling stories.
Right.
And Rich leaves his check behind.
Oh, shit.
And Phil, before he carries it back to Tommy, he looks and he reads the number and immediately goes ballistic because Tommy's making a heck of a lot more money than Phil is. And they go to Jerry Jarrett, and Jerry on the spot makes up some complete BS story about, gimmick money. Those guys, we're keeping their gimmick money and giving it back to this, which was not true. But, that's the wrestling business. Tommy Rich has more value than Phil Hickerson. So even if you're same match, you may not get paid the same. But I think he was probably a guy that said, if I'm not going to be in a good spot, I can just go home for a while.
He did, and that's what I'm gonna pack my shit up and I'm going home, kind of thing. And he's just right down the road. He was different than anyone working the territory during that time. He could go home every night. I tell stories of some of the guys stayed here at an apartment when I was in Jonesboro, so that they didn't have to drive back from Jonesboro to Nashville. They would get up early, super early, like 8 or 9 o'clock, and head on home. But it's just the idea of not being at night and being able to put your head on the floor or on the couch. I had a couch or a floor. You could have either one. Yeah. But it's just one of those things that travel was crappy, even in all the territory. Yeah. I think Mid-South might have been the worst. But
it's kind of like, he got he never said this, I know, but when he was needed and he was wanted, he was there. And when he wasn't needed and wasn't wanted, he wasn't there. And that you keep leverage that way, because if you stick around when they're not using you well, then you're just going to move down the card, and then people are just going to start seeing you as this guy who used to be a top star and you're not anymore.
Well, that's kind of what they did too. And I had said this on, I think it was WTF. I talked about it. Back in the day, they cycled you out. You went to another territory. You gave your notice. I might have said this on 5-minute time limit also this time, but we were talking about Sami Zayn. They were talking about how Sami Zayn is a star for X amount of weeks or months, and then he just kind of disappears into the back, and he comes back. I said, that's typical for the wrestling business. They don't want, you can't push everybody all the time. And Phil felt like, you said, he got started in the business making what we said would be $6,000 a week now. Hell, I wish I made $6,000 a week. Oh, I'm unemployed. What was I thinking? But yeah, I mean, he started on top, and with starting on top, it's hard, as you know, if you ever change jobs and you have to start at the very beginning and go up again, even though you had spent X amount of years on top at another business. It's tough to do, and he never did. He came in when he was, like I said, one of USWA and world class. That angle, whether you liked it or didn't like it, is in wrestling history is one of the hugest angles in the whole deal with, like I said, he got more publicity, I think, from his comment about steroids. And because if it would have just been some local Oco they used 2 or 3 times, it wouldn't have been a big deal.
Right.
But because it was these 2 guys that become huge stars. Hey, Steve's going to stick around just for a few minutes on Patreon. There's something you mentioned during the show, and I didn't want to be an asshole about it. So I'm going to be an asshole about it on Patreon. So
all right. We're looking forward to this.
If y'all want to listen to me be an asshole, then y'all join us. Real quick, put your stuff over about the DJ thing. You mentioned it. I absolutely loved what you're doing, because when I was here's what I started. Here's how I started a podcast. We always talk about cassette wrestling news, and Stone Cold called it the very first wrestling podcast. But as a DJ, I wanted to be a DJ when we went to when I was in college, but everyone around me was saying you're not gonna make no money, kind of thing. Right. But I
true.
yeah, it's true, unless you're Brandy Baxter. Look, or Howard Stern. You know, we do know there is some DJs that make. I made cassettes for my friends and would give them the cassettes, and they were me DJing popular songs.
Very cool.
And I had a friend keep his name is John Cartwright. He's on my Facebook. So if you listen in, John, he kept his years after. I wish he still had it, but he said, man, I was listening to your tape in my deck today. And I said, what tape? He's like, you're DJing. Man, that's what you should have done. And I said, well, you know, and you was talking about looking at the microphone, and I'm at the point now, not that I don't screw up a lot. Don't get me wrong. I do a whole show on bloopers every year.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where you don't see the microphone. I know this is episode 1,000 and I don't know, 60 something. I don't know what it is. But it's one of those things where you don't see that. I guess it was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, when we started doing the streaming. It was real uncomfortable being in front of the camera, in front of the microphone. And now I don't even see myself on the screen because I hide myself, but it's the idea that you just get used to doing it, and it's just one of those things for second nature. All right, I'll shut up talking about myself. You talk about yourself. How can they listen to you on the radio?
Okay, it's KNON Now. It's a community radio station in Dallas. It was actually voted by the Dallas Observer as the best music station in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
And it's community radio, so it's people who volunteer. Every show is different. There's a Broadway show that's going on probably right now. It's on KNON Now. My friend Jamie Brains does kind of a rockabilly-oriented show. I'm on from 2 to 4 every Saturday, and my show's called The Kaleidoscope, and I play everything under the sun. I'm a guy that likes country music. I'm a guy that likes punk rock music. So, every genre of music.
And you would not play my request.
I didn't.
I wanted to back that thing up, or whoop, there it is, and you would not do either one. So
yeah, I really wouldn't kind of, we have to be very, very careful about the content on community radio.
I got some Luke Skywalker too that you could play.
There you go. It's a fun show. Last week I did a special on like people from Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
From Australia. So I did a special show on Australia artists. And they have this thing called Spinatron. If you don't catch it live, you can listen to it for the next 2 weeks. But it's a streaming show, so people can listen to it anywhere in the world. Go to knonow.org and hit streaming, and you can hear my show wherever you are in the world. And I'll be there from 2 to 4 this afternoon.
All right, so you did an Arkansas show. I gotta
did.
ask, did you play any Black Oak, Arkansas?
I played Gin Dandy, buddy.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, baby. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. See, he's a real music. You talking about a music guy. This guy is way beyond me. I do that music podcast just because I'm tired of doing wrestling podcasts. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Same bad time, same bad channel on the best little wrestling podcast in the business. Be there. And as everyone knows, you got to know this by now, Steve, you know this. Oh, you've been on here. Steve equals ratings, y'all. This podcast will be. I'm serious, dude. When you're on here, we should do a regular show. When I finally
skyrocket, huh?
When I semi-retire, it's just gonna be me and you.
I'm the secret sauce, buddy.
There
Yeah, but I do know one thing. I know that you love your mama.
I do love my mama.